Discussions about Iran often dissolve into a dense thicket of geopolitical terminology. The daily news cycle focuses on uranium enrichment, proxy networks, and theories of civilizational conflict. These theories struggle to explain the domestic reality on the ground, a highly educated, progressive youth population consistently pushing against a state that appears frozen in time. To understand this disconnect, we need Occam's razor. This principle suggests that when we are faced with a complex problem, the simplest explanation, the one based on direct physical evidence, is usually the right one. If we move past grand ideological theories, we can examine three specific structural realities that explain how the Iranian state actually functions and why it survives. The survival of this system for over 4 decades is a predictable outcome of measurable economic, historical, and military structures. The 1979 revolution is often remembered as a purely ideological uprising. However, the data from the decade preceding the revolution reveals a more pragmatic economic motivation. In the 1960s and 70s, the Shah launched the White Revolution, a series of top-down modernization policies. While these programs grew the national economy, they aggressively centralized wealth, enriching a narrow state elite while marginalizing rural farmers and traditional merchants. Traditional merchants, or bazaris, saw state monopolies taking their markets. To protect themselves, they allied with the clergy and successfully toppled the monarchy. But the new revolutionary leaders maintained the centralized system, simply transferring control of the nation's wealth to themselves. The revolution resulted in a class-based wealth redistribution, establishing a template for monopoly control that persists in the country today. This history of monopoly explains why a nation with the world's second-largest petroleum reserves continues to endure chronic economic crises. This chart shows how Iran is affected by the resource curse. The primary problem isn't the oil itself, but the extreme volatility of global oil prices. The constant cycle of revenue spikes and crashes makes long-term economic planning nearly impossible. When oil prices are high, the wealth is absorbed by the bonyads, semi-governmental revolutionary foundations, and the IRGC, a military and intelligence branch that has evolved into a sprawling economic monopoly operating outside of standard government oversight. Because these parastatal monopolies hoard resources, the broader economy stagnates. This creates a massive demographic of middle-class poor, highly educated university graduates locked out of a labor market controlled by state insiders. The current economic ruin is a direct result of rent-seeking monopolies failing to manage the volatility of their primary resource. If the economy is failing the public, we must ask why the system hasn't collapsed under the weight of continuous protests. This map illustrates Mosaic Defense, a decentralized military architecture designed to ensure survival. If central command is neutralized, the system doesn't paralyze. Instead, 31 separate regional commands are pre-authorized to act autonomously, maintaining control of their provinces without needing central direction. When protests erupt, this decentralized structure makes the state incredibly resilient. Protesters face a network of regional commands equipped to suppress local unrest independently. The endurance of the state is built on this physical security apparatus rather than ideological support from the population. These structures stand in direct opposition to the state's foundational claim of velayat-e-faqih, translated as the guardianship of the Islamic jurist. This doctrine argues that the clergy has a divine mandate to govern, to ensure justice and public welfare. However, because the system is actually sustained by class monopolies, oil rents, and decentralized force, that ideological claim has lost its legitimacy for the majority of the population. This loss of legitimacy is visible in the streets. The most educated segments of society, particularly youth and women, are actively resisting the economic and social monopolies that define their lives. The central fault line in Iran pits an educated, disenfranchised society against an entrenched military economic monopoly. To understand the future of the country, we should look past the grand geopolitical narratives and watch who controls the wealth, who controls the oil, and how the population pushes back against these physical nodes of power.